Tired of your beloved getting kidnapped by various kings of the jungle? Try Kong Be Gone! Accidentally developed by a remote team of scientists trying to cure acute male pattern baldness, Kong Be Gone is America's leading ape and ape derivative deterrent spray. It uses a patented aerosolized bullet concoction to prevent apes from escapes and prematurely dead dates. Simply spray it at your sapien-based predator and run for the hills.
Before Kong Be Gone, my life was a wreck. I kept getting kidnapped. But now, I do the kidnapping.
It's time to replace your brawn with Gone. Kong Be Gone. Call 888-888-8887 to purchase Kong Be Gone today. Released in 1994 for the Nintendo Game Boy, Donkey Kong is an adaptation of Nintendo's Touchstone arcade title of the same name, and follows the same basic plot of Mario trying to rescue his girlfriend Pauline from the game's eponymous ape. The title was the first Game Boy game to be released with enhanced support for the Super Game Boy, an SNES peripheral that was designed to enable players to enjoy their portable games on their televisions, and allows them to enjoy the adventure in color when played via this device. The game, which is often referred to as Donkey Kong 94, heavily reimagines the 1981 arcade version of Donkey Kong by introducing about 100 new levels, boss battles, and places an emphasis on puzzle and problem solving in conjunction with the original's early platformer action. While I didn't play the original Donkey Kong growing up, I have always been a fan of the character thanks to the likes of Super Smash Bros. And Donkey Kong Country 64. Even though I never got around to playing the arcade original until just a couple of years ago, the game feels like it's always been a huge part of my life due to my affection for Nintendo's Country incarnation of the character, the fact that modern Donkey Kong, or the ape formerly known as Donkey Kong Jr., makes for a fun main in Smash, and because of the character's ties to film history thanks to its many comparisons to MGM's classic King Kong, and the fact that I'm just your everyday run-of-the-mill YouTuber with a useless background in film. It also certainly helps that Donkey Kong is a genuinely great game, with a simple premise, tight controls, and an addictive gameplay loop that happened to be perfect for the Game Boy. But does it hold up? Because while remixing classic arcade games can go well, like in the case of Namco's arrangement versions of many of their arcade hits, that doesn't necessarily mean that Donkey Kong 94 stands on its own after all these years. Before we continue though, a quick question of the day. What is your favorite arcade game of all time? My personal favorite has gotta be Konami's Simpsons arcade game. Growing up, there were a couple of arcades in the area that had a working cabinet for the game that I have a ton of fond memories of patroning. And being the Simpsons fan that I am, I was obsessed with trying to get through this game and see everything that it had to offer. Though I actually didn't end up beating it until sometime in high school when the Simpsons arcade would get ported to Xbox Live. Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day over in the comments. I'd love to hear your answer. And with that out of the way, on with the video. In order to adequately review Donkey Kong 94, I think one must first briefly study its 1981 counterpart. While being able to enjoy its Game Boy incarnation isn't contingent on having played the original Donkey Kong, it certainly helps contextualize things in a way that I feel improves the experience. So here's a fairly abridged look at 1981's Donkey Kong. Developed by Nintendo's R&D 1 team, Donkey Kong was created by Shigeru Miyamoto after one of Nintendo's previous games, Radar Scope, failed to catch on and was filling up American warehouses. Tasked with the job of converting those unused Radar Scope cabinets into something marketable to Americans, Miyamoto, with the help of his lead engineer Gunpei Yokoi, got to work on a game that would eventually become an arcade classic and would spawn a certain omnipresent Nintendo mascot. Once released, Donkey Kong quickly became a staple at any worthwhile arcade, in no small part due to its simple and addictive gameplay. Each of the levels revolve around its protagonist Mario trying to make his way from the bottom of the screen over to the top in order to rescue his girlfriend Pauline from the game's titular character. Along the way, you'll need to dodge obstacles such as barrels or fireballs, and can take advantage of Mario's trusty hammer, which can be used to temporarily wipe out obstacles in his path. From there, the original Donkey Kong is spread out across 4 levels, and is actually only the second game of the era to include multiple stages, with brief cutscenes thrown into the mix too for good measure. At the time, Donkey Kong was a revelation due to these features, and I honestly don't think it'd be an exaggeration to say that it represented the next logical step for gaming. After all, it literally introduced the world to Mario, who would go on to become the face of video games in the preceding years, and was one of the very first platformers. And all of this makes the idea of porting the game over to the Game Boy a fairly great one. After all, Gunpei Yokoi was the lead engineer for the project and also happened to create the Game Boy, so the idea of porting Nintendo's seminal arcade title over to the handheld was a bit of a no-brainer. And it's not like Nintendo had to do much other than get the base game running on the system before calling it a day either, as I sincerely doubt that many gamers were expecting Nintendo to do much of anything with the IP back when the Game Boy version of Donkey Kong came out in June of 1994. And for the gamers who did expect something for the franchise, I think they would have been more interested in the prospects being laid by Rare with Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo, as that game was slated to come out just 6 months later in November. That said, the fact that Nintendo did go the extra mile in bringing Donkey Kong to the Game Boy may be one of my favorite decisions that the company has ever made. Donkey Kong 94 introduces a literal smorgasbord of new levels to the game and spreads them out across 9 worlds, which now also feature boss battles against Donkey Kong himself. Each of the levels build off the foundational elements from the original and throw in goodies like controllable switches, rope traversal that's straight out of Donkey Kong Jr., and more elevators.
Holy
However, Donkey Kong 94 doesn't stop there. It also expands on Mario's abilities by throwing him into a couple of Jane Fonda workout videos and having him be as dynamic and flexible as ever. Mario's able to run and jump just fine here, but he can also perform a backflip and handstand to reach higher areas. He can also still use his hammer in order to wipe out enemies and obstacles, and he can now jump on some of them in order to hoist them into the air and instill a little bit of that classic Doki Doki Panic into the hearts of his opponents too. These touches really go a long way in homogenizing Mario's moveset to match what he's capable of in his own mainline titles, and it really helps bring Donkey Kong 94 in line with what gamers may have been expecting from the character by the mid-90s. More so, it's a considerate iteration that gives the developers the kind of leeway needed to make a title that can stand on its own and forgo resting on the laurels of its arcade original. To use a music metaphor, Donkey Kong feels like the Beatles back in their Mop Top days, while Donkey Kong 94 is the band after they released Revolver. The comparative leap between both games is night and day. The original Donkey Kong comes across as more of a proof of concept than anything when it's put up beside its Game Boy counterpart, which takes the strong foundation of the original and elevates it to its natural conclusion. Donkey Kong 94 feels like the sort of victory lap that a team might take after they've reached their zenith. The Nintendo behind it feels confident in their ability to craft a thoughtful and addictive game, and they've decided to show how good they are by dusting off their first hit and breathing new life into it.
So this is how he did it.
This is only a first crude effort. He has perfected his design.
And somewhat cockily, they've decided to do it on hardware that may be as strong as, if not a little weaker than the boards used to power the original game. Not to mention hardware that was woefully outdated by 1994 and had been outdated since the day the console shipped by design. The added challenges and skills at your disposal here go a long way in keeping the gameplay from becoming too stale and repetitive, which makes for a more in-depth and engaging experience. But as though not to deter players looking for quick pick-up and play experiences, the game's levels are also usually around a minute or two long, and the game allows you to save after each boss encounter, meaning that the game is just as optimized for shorter play sessions as it is longer ones. While the original was designed to be your typical early 80s quarter-sucking arcade title, Donkey Kong 94 generally feels like a much more laid-back and patient affair, and it also has what I consider to be an absolutely incredible difficulty curve. The game can sometimes throw some brain teasers at you that'll take a bit of thought and experimentation to figure out, but it also does a fine job of dropping subtle hints at what you need to do next, as well as uses its cutscenes to try and gently teach or suggest skills that can come in handy. Additionally, there may be a time limit nudging you forward at all times, but the game generally feels like it's giving you the space that you may need in order to solve each of its puzzles. And for a guy like me that loves puzzles but happens to be awful at them, that was really appreciated.
Well, thank you.
While there were levels that would sometimes take me upwards of 10 or 15 minutes to figure out and complete, I never found myself getting frustrated with them. The controls, enemy placement, and design of those challenges genuinely felt so painstakingly crafted that whenever I died, I usually had no one to blame for my failure but myself. And due to the short nature of the stages themselves, failing those challenges never led to monotonous backtracking because I could get back to where I was in no time. Whereas dying in Donkey Kong's arcade version kinda feels like the game is taunting me into throwing another quarter into it, Donkey Kong 94 makes me feel more like death is a happy little accident than anything.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Plus, the game is more than happy to give you oodles of lives through its various bonus games, which helps things feel rather forgiving. While I typically feel as though throwing extra lives at players can come across as a bit of a cop-out for a lack of difficulty scaling, that isn't really an issue here due to the game's top-notch difficulty curve and the fact that the levels are so bite-sized. And seeing as the game came out back in the 90s, at a time when games were only still just starting to shy away from their arcade roots, I can't really hold it against the game for featuring lives to begin with. Though I do have a sneaking suspicion that the game wouldn't feature lives if it came out these days though. Donkey Kong 94 also reworks the visuals of the original to great effect. While the game lacks color due to being a Game Boy title, each of the areas and levels are rendered to great effect and are generally easy to navigate and comprehend. Though, if you're playing through the game on the Game Boy Color or the Super Game Boy, you can actually play through the game in color using their respective color palettes. While I've played through other Game Boy games over the years and found myself wishing that the title was presented in color, the thought of wanting Donkey Kong 94 to have a color hack or some Ted Turner-esque color re-release never really crossed my mind.
Now, the colorization of these films may not agree with some people's artistic sensibilities. But they're mine, and I can do anything I want with them. Nah, 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 nah.
However, I do understand that some players may just wish that Donkey Kong 94 were in color for convenience sake. And to that, I say that your preference for color is certainly a fair one, but I think that the game actually may be better off without it. Because like, yeah, it'd be cool, but I also think that Donkey Kong 94 feels really balanced in its presentation as is, and I feel like keeping things in monochrome may even prevent the game from becoming too overstimulating for some players. And maybe I'm just one to overanalyze things because, again, useless background in film.
That's so mean.
But I think the lack of color here may even serve as a decent metaphor for what separates this game from its original incarnation on an existential level. While the original Donkey Kong was in color, it also happened to feature a vacant black background like many of its contemporaries from back in the day did. And to me, that kinda represents the idea that, while a technical marvel and an absolute beast of early 80s gaming, its potential felt a bit unrealized. I mean, sure, it was in color and all, but the game felt like one where a lot of time and effort went into introducing new and interesting concepts for games in general that it failed to fully develop them to their fullest potential. However, Donkey Kong 94, on the other hand, takes a different approach by fleshing out the graphics with background elements and more animation, while also being released on a platform that couldn't natively output color. And I really hope this review doesn't come across as me claiming that the original Donkey Kong isn't a good game or that it hasn't aged well, because it is, and it has. It's just that Donkey Kong 94 is honestly that much better when you put them up together side by side. Whereas the original kind of feels like a marble slab that's rough around the edges, Donkey Kong 94 feels like a delicately chiseled and refined marble sculpture. Donkey Kong 94's soundtrack also operates under many of the same concepts that its visuals do. While extremely limited in what's possible due to the Game Boy's sound capabilities, the game not only does a great job of recreating the original's iconic music, but also succeeds in riffing off of the original game's arrangements and creating new music that fits the original title, as well as what's on display with all of this game's new content. And while Game Boy music can often be somewhat difficult to listen to in isolation, Donkey Kong 94's arrangements are simple in their composition and clean in their execution, showing a deep understanding of the portable hardware and are a joy to listen to. And while it's not the best soundtrack to ever grace the Game Boy, or even a Donkey Kong title on the Game Boy for that matter, Donkey Kong 94's soundtrack demonstrates a mastery of the console's available tools and sounds that makes for easy listening. So does Donkey Kong 94 hold up? Yeah, totally. The game shows the growth that the video game industry, platformers in general, and Nintendo themselves have gone through in the 13 years since the release of Donkey Kong. And another 27 years later, the game still manages to be every bit as fun and exciting now as it was then. Pound for pound, I may even go as far as to suggest that Donkey Kong 94 is my favorite Donkey Kong game period, and that it's easily my favorite iteration of the arcade original. If you haven't played through this one yet, I can't recommend it enough. Whether you're playing it in black and white, tinted with a Game Boy color palette, or on the Super Game Boy, you're in for a great time. Anyway, with that said and done, that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe or do any of that YouTube social engagement stuff that's all the rage these days. And feel free to leave a comment answering the question of the day too while you're at it. On top of that, if you have a game you want to see get reviewed in the future, feel free to let me know over in the comments or over on Twitter or Instagram. You can follow me on either of those platforms by following the links down in the description or by looking for NichePlays on those respective sites. I hope you enjoyed this video, and that if you do happen to play Donkey Kong 94 sometime soon, that you have a great time doing so. So yeah. Bye.